Welcome to Whachacha's Tabletop World, channel devoted to the love of board gaming. My name is Sweetness Whachacha, and this is my thoughts on fiction's Memoirs of a Gangster. Okay, so this is a cooperative game with a really cool little theme, actually. I love when you get to play the bad guys. Now, this is a pulpy kind of a game. I love pulp. You know, I love those old stories and things. The theme really sings in this one. I'll get to that a little more in a moment. But I love to play the bad guy. I like to be the villain. I always love the villains in the movies. I think they're much more memorable than the heroes. And I try to live a good life. I try to do the right thing in my life all the time. Whether I do or not, I guess that's another thing. But it's fun when you know, because these aren't things that I'm going to be doing in my real life. I'm not going to be the bad guy. And so I think it's very fun to do that. Now, this game is, as I hopefully mentioned, cooperative, and it's scenario driven. Okay, let's back up first, and just talk about the theme for a moment, a little bit more. The theme is really strong in this game. You find it on the cards, just little nods and things. You know, you find it on the cards in the various scenarios that you're going to be in. You know, there's each of the cards themselves, whether they're like little problem cards or other challenges and tests and things. They're going to put on there, you know, things like, you know, little 1 or 2 lines of flavor text, and it makes so much sense, and it's really lovely. And every card has it, you know, like you have to read into the characters a little more because they don't have any flavor text to kind of see. But it is like you get like the boxer. It's all walks of life that are recruited to your mob or your mafia, because those guys, you know, when you're running a crime family, you know, you may have somebody on the payroll that, you know, not everybody's killing people, not everybody's shaking people down and beating people up. You know, some people are just doing unethical things to help you out, whether they're like giving ill information, you know, whatever. So I like that there's large walks of life there. And I love those little flavor texts in on every other card, you know, that test that you're going to get. They're very fun. They're very funny sometimes. And you know, the game is full of these cliches. It's interesting. When we see movies, we don't like to see cliches. We're like, that's a cliche. But in games, we delight in them, you know, like we're just like, oh, cool. I'm doing that thing that you always see in this movie, you know. And so this game is full of all the little cliches and things, but they're fun to do. They're all the fun kind of things to do. So this game is wonderfully thematic. I really love it. And it's a really great little production as well. It's crazy. You know, you get tokens for all of these. So I should back up. It's all scenario based, okay? And each of the, so there's 8 different scenarios, and each of the scenarios has like its own little set of tokens that are like screen printed, really lovely. The game was not very expensive either. In this current game world we live in, games tend to be very expensive, and this one was not very expensive. And like I said, those components are really good. There's very chunky dice, great little symbols, very easy to read. The art is very lovely. As I said, you get a board for every single scenario. So it has a place to put everything. It has rules reminders on there. You flip it over. There's the other scenario. So you have you have 4 different boards to do that. As I said, each have their own set of tokens, and as I said, they're screen printed. So that's kind of over the top on there as well. In addition to that, you know, it has like I said, the boards have all the slots for the different things to help you. And then, you know, each of the scenarios has its own deck. It has a police card with its own little rules. It has its own little rules reminder that you put at the top. It has a couple decks of cards, you know, that give that scenario its own flavor and its own, you know, twists or whatever. So there's quite a lot of components here that are really well done. As I say, the art, the flavor text, all that stuff is really well done. You have some other miscellaneous cubes and things to help make the game a little easier. And all that stuff really works together, like, to make this game actually pretty easy to learn. There were a few things where you're like, wait a second, like the die don't have you don't have a little cheat sheet with the die results sometimes, like for the red die and stuff like that. And so there's a few things when you're playing, especially when you're playing a new scenario, you might have to like go and clarify that rule. Oh wait, what was that again? But mostly it's really pretty easy to learn. Now, this is another thing, because this game is really in my wheelhouse in terms of like the style of game I like. And that is, what I mean by that is that like, I love to learn the rules for a game, like, right? And then have a lot of different scenarios or modules or what have you. Whether it's Orleans has like, its expansion has like 5 different modules, they just shake the game up. You know, Lord of the Rings or the living card games, you know, like Marvel Champions and things, you know how to play the game, and now you get different challenges. Same thing with like a Pandemic. You know that system, and now here's different ways to play it. And I really love that, you know, and even a game like, you know, Lewis and Clark or something, where like, the assortment changes every time. And so I love that because, you know, I don't have to learn a whole new game every time, but I get the variety. This is like, you know, what people go for when they want expansions for games. And that's really, really awesome, I think. Now, you always play with the third scenario because that's your ultimate goal, is your bid for power to become the mayor of the city. And I love that theme as well, by the way. But all the other scenarios you can mix and match. So you can say, well, you know what? I like these scenarios a lot, these couple of scenarios a lot. I'm just going to play them. You could just do that if you wanted to. So I really love that. I think that's a really cool thing. The time in between. Now, I think of a game like Aeon's End Legacy, which I actually really enjoyed playing that game. The game part of it was fine. I liked it. I loved the between, kind of being able to do the in-between stuff and upgrade your deck and things. This, you know, each of the components of this game, nothing is like overpowering, like this is amazing about it, but it has a bunch of different nice things. And I think that's one nice little touch where in between scenarios, you get to spend your points. There's a huge choice there. You're going to kind of say, okay, I'm going to go for these level 2 people or level 3 people. You know, you can get more level 2s and you can get level 3, and you get a choice between 2. You can't just look through the deck. I kind of wish that was the case, because although that might have been overpowered to just get the best people, but I think it's really cool. I like that you can do a little bit of upgrading in between round 1 and round 2 before you go in. And that's kind of the goal, right? The goal of each of these scenarios is to do well enough to buy more cards to help you to do better. It actually reminds me a lot, again, of another game, Friday, which it feels very similar to in some ways, because that game you're like continually upgrading your deck so you can beat the challenge at the end. In this way, the first 2 scenarios are really only really interested in gaining enough points, experience points and they're shown in different ways, but you're trying to get those experience points to upgrade your deck enough. But you're essentially playing the same game, okay, which is a dice game. Now, I was pretty nervous when I saw that. I was like, ooh, this is a dice game, because I'm not a person that really loves luck in my games. I understand that not every game can be like just deterministic. That's too much, I think. But I like a little bit of randomness, a little bit of luck, but I like to lean much more into the non-luck based game, the skill based game. And here is very interesting because there are so many choices. You get to choose which character goes first, and then you have a set of actions you can do. You know, there are things that you should do every turn, but sometimes you're like, look, I got to control the police. That's important, but you know what? That maybe the police's effect isn't as bad, and you're like, you know what? And if it's getting closer to the end of the game, you think, okay, there's some scenarios that you can just win or leave pretty early, earlier. You don't have to go through the whole game. So you might think, you know what, we're going to let the police go. That's not going to affect us this round. It will next round, but hopefully we'll be done by then. So maybe you skip them. When you go to roll dice, you're like, I'm going to commit people in my hand to that test. And I like the fact that they come back, but you're risking them, because if you roll those lock symbols, you'll kill them, or you'll either kill them or you'll exhaust them and they'll leave your hand. But if you play a couple, maybe you'll play a couple because you want to, if you get a damage, then, you know, you'll be able to pull them all back to your hand, but you can only play a couple. And then there's the cool thing of like, hey, I want to commit this person to this test because they have an expertise, but I love their special ability, so I want to kind of leave them in my hand so I can use that special ability. And so it really is it's like a million shades of gray. You know, should I do this test? Should you do it? Should you have an ability to do you have anything, you know, like an ability to help me? Do I have an ability? Do I want to use the person because they have the right expertise, or do I want to just use somebody, you know, that has, you know, the same symbol or the same color, or, you know, like there's all these little things, and like maybe I hold this guy back because I can use this power, but if I use the power, then I exhaust them and I don't have them on my hand anymore. Or do I just roll more dice and just hope that I can bring them back to my hand so that I can continually use them, because your hand could be huge. You can just keep drawing cards. And I like that. You can just spend the first couple turns, just draw, like just keep drawing a ton of cards if that's what you want to do. So there's so many, and then of course you can roll the red die. Red die is great. It multiplies, you know, you can do really, really well and crush a test, but you can also get a bad thing. You have a draw problem, which is another thing you're going to have to deal with. Or you can, you know, get another lock symbol on that, which will damage your person. So it's a risk. There's tons and tons of risks. But I think as a dice game, this is amazing. It's a great system. I've never really seen one like this, where you're like, you could play the special powers. Your partner can play the special powers. You can commit different people to the tests. Different people have better or worse skills. You can keep drawing cards. You can get to reuse those cards. You'll come back to your hand at the end of the round unless they get damaged. play the special abilities? Do you play the red die or not? There's a lot of randomness here, but it's so controlled and you can really fine tune it. Sure, you can make a roll and you can lose. But you know what? Most of the time you're like, well, that was bad, but I should have hedged my bets a little better. I should have left a character skill out that I could play to kind of try to re-roll them, add some die, ignore a die result, there's some of the characters who add a number of successes. So there's so much to it. And I feel like that's a gamery decision. There's tons of just tiny little decisions, little tweaks you can make to get the results that you're really hoping for and playing those odds. And of course, you're not always going to get what you wanted. Sometimes you will, sometimes you won't, but you have a lot to mitigate. And I feel like as a dice game, which is generally not something I really go for, this is one of the best kinds. I really love that style about it. And let's talk a little bit about that teamwork. I talked about that a second ago. I love games where you can talk about ththings and say, look, I got a lot more cards. I'll take the problem this round. Maybe I can deal with it a little easier. I have, their symbol, hey, I don't have any symbols to control the police. I'm not going to do that this round. I'll have my partner do it. Now, this is one of the dings in the game. It has this rule of you can't tell somebody what symbols you have, what powers you can't tell them exactly what you have. You can say, well, and I hate this kind of thing in a game because you can kind of say, which is so dumb because I never like this in games when you're like, well, I have a pretty good strength at doing this, but I'm not great at it. And essentially, you're just adding more words. You're just saying, hey, I'm going to tell you what I have here, but I'm not going to. It's like, well, if it's 1 out of 4, it's like, well, I'm not really great at this. I'm kind of good at it. And you're like, okay, they have a 2 or a 3. It just artificially inflates the game. I don't like that. I guess I get why you're saying hey, I have this symbol or I have this card, so you go ahead and roll away. But you could say hey, you can roll a little more confidently because I have some ability to help you. Well, what does that mean exactly? I don't know. It just seems kind of a bad rule to me. I've seen this in tons of games. Some of my favorite games have it. I just don't personally like it. So I prefer to just communicate. You can play how you want. Now, leaning into this, if you play solo, which this is a fantastic solo game. I really love it solo. I'm a big solo gamer. Playing out your tableau in front of you, you can see all the symbols. It does give you a bit of advantage because you have all the information in front of you from both players. It does eliminate that silly little rule as well, which I quite like playing it solo. Fantastic solo game. You can, it's not too much information, I don't think. I think it's one of those things that plays exactly like the regular game would, which is important to me for a solo game. I don't really like to learn extra rules or weird little rules and things like that are different from the normal game, and so I really do enjoy it solo. So if you're a solo player, and there's a ton of variety there, as I said, I think that's one of the big strong suits of the game is that scenario-driven game where you can play different scenarios, and especially playing solo, you can just play through a bunch of different stuff, different combos and things, and it's good to kind of challenge yourself to try to win the, to win the overall campaign. And speaking of, I do like that you can break it up. You can say break it up. So you can play, hey, look, we're gonna play the, this one scenario tonight, and tomorrow night we'll play the next one. I mean, the whole thing probably takes around 2 hours, depending on how you play. I think mostly I played between 1.5 hours to 2 hours when I play the full campaign. I like to go through it in one sitting because I like to kind of just play through a game. But I do like that you can play just, you're like, look, we don't have 45 minutes tonight or the 30 minutes, let's just play through a little bit of this game and then we'll do some more tomorrow. So I think that flexibility, quite nice. And it's not like you have to remember all this stuff for the next one. No, you can just look and say, oh yeah, I remember we bought these cards, when we upgraded or whatever, and then that's it. That's all you really have to remember. So, yeah, quite a nice little way to break it up. Not a huge deal, but a nice little piece, I think. Okay, so overall, my thoughts on this one. I love the theme. The components are great. Very, very lovely production. Love to play as that bad guy. Scenario based, which is great. They're not so different. They still maintain the core of the game, but they add that variety there. Pretty easy to learn. The ease of play. You can see things, and they've taken some pains to make things easy to understand. So it's, you can spend more time playing the game. I love that. It's a dice game, so there is luck, but there's a ton of little tiny decisions that you can make in gray areas and things like that. So the strategy is very important. The choices that you make, you can really dial in, so you can mitigate it quite a bit. It's one of my favorite systems I've found that have dealt with a dice game like this. Wonderfully thematic, fun to play, great solo game, has some teamwork there. With a little bit of a weird rule. So yeah, this is a big thumbs up for me. Really fantastic little game that I would highly recommend. That's Fiction. I can never remember the name properly. I'm like, did I leave the iron on? I gotta look at the title. Fiction's Memoirs of a Gangster. But for now, I gotta roll.